In this video, I want to show you a fun way to draw a dungeon map that you can slowly reveal to your players one room at a time. I just ran a playtest game for a new Shadow Dark adventure that I'm writing up. It's going to be finished and released at the end of this month. Linked to my Patreon in the description. It's called The Frozen Ascent, and I'm really stoked on how the playtest went. Here's all the notes I made from the session, and you can see that I drew like a really rough layout of this dungeon. We didn't use a map in the game, just theater of the mind, but at the end of the playtest, I kind of thought I really wish I had made a map that the players could see. Even though it's a pretty simple dungeon, just 9 rooms with some encounters in between the rooms, I spent a lot of the session explaining how each room, each area of the dungeon connected, and really what I should have done is just drawn the map as we played, or better yet, have the map prepared so I could just lay down one room at a time. So that got me thinking about how I can tackle this problem, and I found a little pad of sticky notes with grid paper printed right on there, ready to go. So I want to try and make a cool recreation of this dungeon, just a really simple layout, but in sticky note sized sections. Now, instead of drawing each room on a sticky note and then trying to connect them after the fact, I'm starting by laying out a bunch of sticky notes to create a single big sheet of grid paper. This way I can see the entire dungeon as I'm drawing it, and then I can break it apart into the individual rooms later. So for this drawing, I'm going to be using these 2 black Posca markers. I love drawing with Posca markers. There's a PC 5M for the outlines, and then a PC 1M for the texture that I'm going to be adding later. I'll have these linked in the description, but really you can use whatever type of pen you want. Actually, a Sharpie would work really well for this. You just have to be careful because a Sharpie will definitely bleed through these sticky notes. Now, actually drawing this dungeon is super simple. I'm using the big marker to just make the outlines of the rooms and hallways. And now that I think about it, this dungeon is a cave on top of this frozen mountain, so the grid maybe isn't super helpful. But if I was drawing a more traditional dungeon, stonework hallway kind of dungeon, rectangular rooms, the grid would be essential to the process. I don't want to use a ruler, so following a grid and measuring out rooms just by looking at the paper, way better. But I guess at the same time, having this 1/4 inch grid on the sticky notes will actually help the players visualize the scale, especially if they've played on a grid with miniatures before. Even though this isn't intended for miniatures, you can kind of like see what scale is going on here if you just assume that a character is 1 grid tile size. Now you might be able to see that I have written in a few room numbers with pencil. I did this to help me plan out what rooms go where, and it just helps me reference back to my little map sketch and know how each of these rooms are going to connect. Like room number 5 has 1 entrance, 1 exit, that kind of thing. If you need to plan things out more in pencil, that should work just fine. The only thing is you got to be really careful when erasing on these sticky notes because only one end is held down, and it's really easy, especially when you have them laid out like this, to bend and accidentally fold the paper. Speaking of, I got a quick tip for you using these sticky notes for map drawing. If you just yoink a sticky note off of the pad, it'll be all curled up and it won't lay down on the table nice and flat for drawing. So my recommendation is to just go super slow with it and pull up from one side halfway and then go from the opposite direction towards the middle to unstick the rest of the sticky note. It'll stay much flatter on the table that way. But even if you get a curly sticky note, you can always just bend it back in the opposite direction to calm it down a little bit. So anyway, I'm really happy with how this dungeon is turning out. It's this big cave inside this mountain that's recently been frozen, and there's these dark clouds spiraling above the peak of the mountain. In Shadow Dark games, you have to worry about your torches going out, and that's definitely a big part of this dungeon. There are these weird little little alien ice crab creatures that will attack you if your torch goes out. But there's also going to be this fun, cold, frozen mechanic too, where the colder you get, the more things start to change and get weird. Of course, like my other adventures, there's some fun NPCs like this capybara dude who's just hanging out in the middle of this dungeon, and of course some fun magic items as well. So yeah, I'm just having a lot of fun making an adventure for a specific system. It's kind of unlocked some fun creative ideas, and it's got me thinking about how to make fun traps and cool maps and all of that stuff. If that sounds fun and interesting, the Frozen Ascent will be wrapped up and available on my Patreon at the end of this month. Like I said, link is in the description. There's tons of other fun stuff on there too. Okay, back to map drawing. I'm adding some room numbers to each note. That way I'll be able to keep them in order and know which one is which when I throw them down onto the table. If there's a bigger room that needs multiple labels, I put a little tick mark on the corner of the number so I know how the room is oriented in relationship to the other parts of the room. Now I could stop there and have a perfectly good dungeon ready to lay out on the table room by room, but I feel like adding some texture to this map and spending a little bit more time to make it look extra cool. So I'm going to use the smaller marker to make some hatch marks around the outside of the dungeon walls. Basically, I'm just doing 3 little slashes and then rotating, doing 3 more, rotating, doing 3 more. Trying my best to make sure that the groups of hatch marks are always going in a different direction. Now, to fill up a big area with this texture can be kind of tedious, but it can also be relaxing and fun too. Sometimes I like to just zone out and make marks on a page with a pen. You know, I love drawing with these markers, and this is no exception. You don't always have to draw some complicated thing. You can just fill a page up with a cool looking pattern. And you can see that I'm not being too careful about it. This texture is a little bit messy, but it's still gonna look good and make it super clear what area of the drawing is explorable dungeon and what area is the inside solid part of a frozen mountain. I should also say you don't have to do this particular texture. You could fill in the outside areas with a solid color or solid black, or you could do a totally different texture like a bunch of stippling dots or something like that. Okay, now that I've got the texture added, I'm just gonna put the sticky notes back on the pad in order. Then I can throw another pad on top to keep them nice and flat. And then they'll be ready to go, ready to throw down on the table for my next playtest session. Now you might be asking, is this really easier than just drawing the map out as you play? Maybe not, but this playtest was my first time running a Shadow Dark game, and I had a lot I was trying to keep track of in my head. Plus, I'm not sure drawing the map at the table would have saved more time than just explaining it. Spending a little bit more time up front to make the sticky note map like this means I can be ready when the players move into the next dungeon. Just throw down the sticky note and it explains how everything connects, and I don't have to explain and re-explain, and there's a pathway to the northwest and there's another pathway to the southwest and blah 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 blah. Let me know what you think of this sticky note map idea down in the comments. I think it's a pretty fun way to prep a map without going into full-blown battle map, you know, really involved kind of stuff. I think it's a good solution to having a map that you reveal one room at a time, and you can kind of keep the mystery going as the players explore and as the game unfolds. If you'd like to support the channel, check out my Patreon and my online shop. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya!